I want to begin this video essay by discussing the topic of inclusion. There will be a video which parallels Shelley Moore's description of the various stages of inclusion that should lead to a conversation about why it's important to be inclusive and not just to recognize diversity. Before we begin talking about diversity and social justice, which is what the article is largely about, we need to have a theoretical understanding of what inclusion is and what it is not. Shelley Moore created a fantastic visual about this, which is often found in textbooks, and it looks something like this. Imagine, if you will, if we have an institution or society that's recognized as this big black circle. Those who are included into the circle are homogeneous, all one type, these green dots. Those who are other are excluded from the institution. In the past, many groups of people were excluded from our Western education system. They were not allowed, or it was socially inconceivable for them to move into that system. I'm going to use the example of disability, but you can understand the context to other institutions. In the past, children with disabilities were not allowed within learning spaces such as schools. The next group of bubbles shows segregation. This is when a separate system that is physically and socially separate from the main institution occurs. Again, using the example of disability, students would go to a quote-unquote special schools. In some cases, these schools are still in operation within British Columbia, but that is a conversation for another time. The point is that students are removed from their non-diverse peers into a separate space, both socially and physically. The third circle shows integration. This is basically when students are within the same space, but they're excluded from the same activity and social interaction. There's still a barrier between them and their peers, and that barrier creates problems with social hierarchy, institutional or otherwise. An example of this would be special classrooms, quote unquote. A student in this case with a disability is removed from their peers without disabilities. Another example is when students are within the same room, but the barrier still exists. If a student is in a room and that student is doing grade level 1 math while the rest of the students are doing grade 6 language arts, there's still a barrier and segregation based upon that. The point as shown in this fourth circle is to integrate the students into the classroom so that they are doing the same sort of activity as their peers, even if it's not the same expected level as their peers. The students are integrated together. And this, you would imagine, is inclusion, except this is not the case still. Often, examples don't show the final point that Shelley Moore later comes to. This is still not integration because there's still an other. We recognize that the green dots as hierarchically the majority, but the truth is that there's really no difference between any particular one dot and another, and each dot is an individual, and that is different from the next. So now that we've discussed the reason why diversity and inclusion is important within our school and how the two are interlinked, and a little bit of the history behind kind of the way diversity was looked at in the past, I do want to discuss the actual document. So the document has two objectives: promote awareness of diversity and support social justice for all. This has 2 points: that there were differences between people, and that some people were treated unfairly because of these differences, and that there are achievements made by all people of all creeds. The document is about a practical application of making a more equitable and comfortable classroom within our ways to adapt the environment, aka our classrooms in the school, to better welcome diverse learners, self-manage and test our assumptions about how well we as teachers are supporting learners and supporting students' expression and contributions to society and the school. The document discusses how some variations are visible and some are not visible, how to apply classroom democracy and when to apply classroom democracy, and deal with social justice related contexts in the broader community. It discusses how it can be awkward or difficult to discuss social situations with students, but how in doing so you can broaden the conversation if it's done well. The document expresses some ways to deal with conflict and how to navigate such conversations to diffuse challenging situations. For example, you can acknowledge the disagreements and focus on answering tough problems with questions to elicit thought, focus on students' learning objectives, utilize specific classroom behaviors to the broader social justice context, remind students that people from the same group are still individuals with differing views, move past the quote-unquote oppression debate, where it's futile to compare and contrast social hierarchies as being more or less objectified to each other, particularly in a past context. Intervene in discussions to bring new points across, or potentially personalize or depersonalize situations as context warrants. As you can see, there are a lot of strategies, and you need to apply best judgment in these cases. After this point, there are some detailed examples of how to teach diversity and social justice from kindergarten through grade 12. Rather than doing an overview of each area, it's better to treat the document as a resource. If you were to incorporate more diversity education within a physical education at the grade 2 level, for example, you can turn to the kindergarten to grade 3 section of the book and take a look at the physical education section for ideas. In this way, you can use the resource document to better suit your own students and classroom needs. Thank you again for listening to this section. I will now turn you over to Donovan. And then after Donovan, there will be a short video. And then after that short video will be Michael with the activity.
Thanks, Liam, and welcome to the second section of our presentation on inclusive education. My job as the webber and questioner was to do the webbing and questioning. So I'm going to start with a web map, and see if I can shrink myself down. So these are all terms and ideas taken out of the course reading. So at its center we have inclusive education. So the three different major branches that I connected to this were building diversity and social justice themes into the curriculum. So that's the current curriculum. Social responsibility standards that you can build in your classroom, and managing conflict. So I'll start with the small branch here. So managing conflict related to discussion. So one of the best ways to basically have discourse or raise ideas is to have class discussions about diversity and inclusive education. But some of the things, especially with younger students who haven't maybe thought too much about or don't have as much awareness about others, they might say things that could hurt feelings. So you have to be really careful to create an environment where people are free to express themselves, but it's really well understood that you won't tolerate ignorant or hurtful speech towards others. So that has to be something that you set up from the outset. Okay, so the next section I'll look at is the social responsibility standards. So this is from page 14 in the course reading. So the four are contributing to the class and school community, solving problems in a peaceful way, valuing diversity and defending human rights, and exercising democratic rights and responsibilities. So I think these would be great to have as a poster for how to treat others, how to be inclusive in your classroom. It would be an awesome project to build something like that with your class. And then, so the bigger area that was covered in the reading was how to build diversity and inclusiveness into the various subjects. So for math, we have basically in questions within either quizzes or examples, including diverse people in word questions. And then the other one for math is looking at inequalities around the world. So income and resource inequalities is something you can build into questions. In English language arts, so you could look at different types of language and ask students whether it's hurtful or respectful. Understand the feelings and motivations of characters and stories. Use respectful speaking and listening skills to facilitate interactions with others. Suggest solutions to problems in the classroom. And these are primarily for the K to grade 3 range. Suggest solutions to problems in the classroom, stories, and real-life situations, and begin recognizing differing points of view. So within science, again, like math, you want to have diverse representation in examples and questions. And then you also, if you're looking at like role models of who is a scientist, you want to debunk the myth that a lot of people have that science is done by white old men, which is not at all true. So showing diversity of scientists, and if you invite someone who works as a chemist or a biologist into your classroom, thinking about diversity and who's represented. Within social studies, humanities, obviously there's a lot of ways to incorporate it. So the importance of group belonging, it's also covered in the circle of courage. Representation of diverse families, representation of diverse gender and sexual identities, looking at social structures even at a very young age, and then looking at different languages and cultures and human needs, what people need to survive and thrive. Within physical and health education, so respect and encouragement, emotional health, caring behaviors within a family, what that should look like, so discussing that. Positive and negative behaviors in friendships, strategies to deal with common relational conflicts, and effective communication, and the attributes that we admire in other people. So that's just a snapshot of the themes that I pulled out. So now I'm going to move into the question section. I can move my bubble. No, it's not cooperating. All right. So, is incorporating diversity and inclusion into the current curriculum enough? And I would say it is not enough. So, a big part of the webbing map was how to incorporate it, which is definitely something that's important to do. But one thing that a lot of articles that I looked at regarding inclusive education discussed, especially with regards to Black Lives Matter, was regarding the fact that a lot of, the things that have being built into the education system are based on European knowledge, European ideas, European ways of thinking, and that to really have an inclusive education, we need to completely revamp the basis for the education system. So it's important to include diversity and inclusionary kind of ideas into the current curriculum, but at its fundamental core, our education system is still based on a European model. So ideally, over time, we'll kind of unravel that and reconceptualize what the core principles and practices within the education system are. The second question that I looked at was, should the article have explained less understood diversity terminology? So things like ableism, gender identity, sexual identity, because there's lots of confusion with some of these terms. So ableism is, for those who aren't familiar with the term, it's discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. So that could be within the environment, people that have mobility issues, and having tons of staircases within an environment is a discriminatory environmental standard. Gender identity versus sexual identity. So gender is related to behavior. So how one feels most comfortable behaving, their mannerisms, the way that they express themselves. So that's gender identity. Sexual identity is physical biology. So, the parts that you have and that sort of thing. So that's a common misunderstanding that people have between transgender or transsexual. So that's an important term that I thought maybe could have been covered a bit more in the article. So those are the two questions that I thought hadn't quite been answered fully in the article. So now I'm going to pass it over to Mike Buckley. Oh, sorry, before that, we're going to show a quick little video that we thought would be great for demonstrating positive cultural diversity. It's about 3 minutes, and then it'll be over to Mike for the activity portion. Thanks. Oh, and then, of course, yeah, the answer that yes, it should have explained these less understood terms. Okay, all for me.
Thank you, Donovan. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike, and I am doing the activity for a presentation today for teaching diversity and social justice. So the activity that we have put together is a scenario-based one where there's going to be questions, and what we want you guys to do is, put you into a situation where you're putting your teacher's hat on, because let's face it, in a year or so, we're all going to be teachers, and we're going to have situations and issues come up in the classroom that we are going to have to deal with. So I will give you a quick little rundown of where you can find these questions once at the conclusion of the presentation, and you guys can take part in that activity. So you're going to go under our week 5, because that's the week that we're presenting, and you'll see a link. The document will be this one. So what I want you guys to do is take 5 to 10 minutes and answer one of the 3 scenarios that are on there, and then take part in the lesson on the 4th page. Feel free to answer as many questions as you want if you have time. So you're going to click this link down here, the Jamboard. It's going to then take you to this right here. So here is the first scenario. I'll just give you a quick little rundown. This is the second scenario here, and this is the third one. So yeah, when it comes to curricular connections and you are teaching at the primary level, there will be opportunities to discuss diversity and social justice issues in many different classes. Compare the similarities and differences if you were, say, teaching in a fine arts class compared to a PE class. So that's just one of the scenarios. So hopefully it will get you engaged, get you thinking more like a teacher, and if you're in that situation. So just do a sticky note, bounce things off our fellow teacher candidates. If you see something that they like, you can kind of talk about it with them. On the 4th page here, we have a sample lesson plan. It's from a grade 2 to 3 class in drama. And what the teacher's done is got everyone standing up and they play a game. And so what it is they ask questions. So here's a few sample questions here. The first one is, who has ever lived in another province? So basically, if say 5 students have lived in a different province, they're going to link up arms and then they're connected. So it's a connecting game. It's about diversity and about coming together and just learning about one another. So what you can do here is, once again, put sticky notes on there and just maybe what you think about this sample lesson plan, if you would do this in your class, or maybe some other questions that would be great to get to know someone, get to know other people in the class. So if you can take 5 to 10 minutes like I said, at the conclusion of this presentation and take part in that, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to go back here. So that does take us to the conclusion of our presentation. I want to thank my 2 partners, Liam and Donovan, for their excellent parts in this presentation. I also want to thank all of you for listening and taking part in the listening of it and the activity to follow, and to all the other people that are going to be presenting. Good luck, and we look forward to listening to your guys' presentations. Thank you. Have a great day.